fellow Planeswalkers.
I'm James.
And I'm Paul.
And you're listening to the newest episode of the Commander at Arms podcast. This week on the podcast, we are talking about the top 10 cards we think should be played more in Commander. But before we do all that, we have our upkeep trigger to do here. I want to thank all of our patrons for your support. You guys help keep us fed and keep the lights on here in my studio and in Paul's studio as well. If you want to support the show directly, you can do it through patreon.com/commanderatarms. All tiers get access to the Discord channel, and some tiers get access to playing Magic with Paul and I over Discord. And if you can't support us that way, if you pop over to Apple Podcasts, you can leave a 5-star review, which will help us get noticed in their algorithm, as well as just sharing our name with all of your friends, family, and playgroup. After that, we have Mail Day and Interesting Finds. Paul, have you found anything or bought anything spicy, medium, or mild?
Not yet, but there is a strong chance, I would say I'm bordering on like 80% right now, that I will be ordering at least a few copies of a card that we will be mentioning later on in this list today. The only green card we actually have on here, actually, to be honest.
And it is a very spicy card. I haven't ordered anything recently. That's actually a lie. I gave a list to my LGS to find some commons and uncommons that I needed for my EDH Artisan deck that I brewed and put together and put a YouTube video out about. So go and check out the Titania over Benthic Druid list. I'm putting that together for a stream that I'm doing this week with Islane from the Possibility Storm. So that will be at it's at 4 p.m. EST, which is 1 p.m. PST on Saturday the 12th of March. Yes. I'm really bad at remembering dates.
You did also have a spicy little $1 purchase on Saturday, James. So I'm going to remind you.
Oh, yeah, I did, didn't I? I even forgot about that. I guess this kind of brings up the little anecdote with that Paul and I, if you see our Twitter and our Instagram feed, you know that Paul and I actually got to meet up and hang out again in person, and it was a fantastic day. Myself, Paul, my wife, and our friend Ross and his friend Mark Anthony all popped over to Windows Comics and Collections and played Magic in person for the first time in what felt like forever. We did a massive pot of 5. I got blown out, and Paul got to play one of my decks, and I'll let him explain how that experience was. But I was going through the 3 for 50 binder, and I found all of the Tron lands from 5th edition in the exact versions I wanted to buy from TCG Player a while ago. Just couldn't afford. Oh no, sorry, it was Card Kingdom. They kind of didn't come in my list, and so for $1, sorry, it was 3 for $1. Sorry, not 3 for 50 cents. So for $1 I picked up Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Tower in the Mountain Edition, and Urza's Mine.
Actually, I also forgot that from that same binder, I was like, you know what? Because I mentioned this before, but I don't like to go into my LGS and not spend money. So I think I wound up buying, I bought a pack of Modern Horizons 2.
Mm-hmm. I
bought a set booster, and I actually got a Murktide Regent, which is like one of the best cards from that set right now. I also bought some Kamigawa packs, but nothing notable from there. But from that binder, I actually got a Dollhouse of Horrors, a Sundering Titan for my cube, and a Sun Titan, all for $1. And not only that, but I also got a old bordered foil Dig Through Time, the F&M promo they had in November last year, I think. The reason was because I had bought a box at that store last week, I think, a box of Kamigawa, and apparently they were out of the promo. So when I came back, I was like, hey, I never got a promo. I was wondering if you had any in stock. He said, no, but they have a binder full of other promos that they substitute in when that happens. So he was like, just pick one. Of course, I went for the old bordered foil Dig Through Time because it's so pretty and so cool and just such a good card. And yeah, that's that, I guess.
Was that meant to be the same Dig Through Time that we got when we were doing the remember when we were going there and we got the Aetherflux Reservoir, the Goblin Guide, and the Scavenging Ooze? Was it in that same treatment?
It was Bolus's Citadel, but yes, it was part of the same promo cycle.
What did I say?
You said Aetherflux Reservoir, which would have been very
Wow.
expensive.
Yeah, my brain had the picture of Bolus's Citadel in my head, but for some reason my brain also went Aetherflux Reservoir is like the payoff win con from Bolus's Citadel. I don't even know how my own brain works sometimes. So we're gonna just move on now to the next little part of our upkeep trigger here. We're going to shout out our YouTube channel. So this is Commander at Arms. Was it youtube.com/commander@arms? You can check out all of our deck techs and everything over there. The Tatiova Benthic Druid video is over there as well as the newest episode of To the Battlefield, which is our show where we get to play Magic with your favorite content creators, our friends and patrons. So go and check those out. Go and give them some love. Also, if you want to watch the episode of To the Battlefield being streamed live, you can do it on our Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/commanderatarms. We go live on Wednesdays at 8:30 EST, again, with your favorite content creators, our friends, and our patrons. Paul, do you have a play of the week from one of those spicy games we played at our LGS?
Let's see. We only really played one game, and occasionally I like to just, put all my decks aside and just say, hey, can I borrow one of your decks? So on Saturday, when I went to play James, which you can see a picture of us that day over on our Twitter, I was like, hey, James, let me borrow a deck. He's like, sure, no problem. Lays out the average power level ones that he's got. He's like, all right, here's your choices. I went with Yarok, mainly because it was one that he and I worked on together, so I was a little familiar with it already. But it functions way better than I thought it would. I drew a lot of cards. It also helps that people let me have a lot of cards off Ristic Study, a card that I normally hate. I want to say I drew over 2 turn cycles, 10 cards off Ristic Study.
Yeah.
That seems like an accurate amount. May have been a little less, a little more, maybe plus or minus 1. But I drew a lot of cards, and how did I actually win that game? I can't remember. James, fill in the gaps for me, because my memory is actually taking a turn for the worse.
Team of Sabertooth, Peregrine Drake make infinite mana.
Yes, that's what it was.
Yeah,
I had exactly 5 mana, and
Yeah.
the last card I drew was a Peregrine Drake. And I saw I had Teamer Sabertooth in hand, and I had double ETB, so I just floated some mana. I had infinite mana, and then James's partner, Michaela, was like, hey, let me have another turn. It's like, sure, no problem. I got other plans in store anyway. So I just sat there with all my mana untapped, and I put a Teferi in play. And I let her do one thing, and then she tried to do another thing, and I was like, nah, sorry, you can't do that. I have Teferi out. But don't worry, I got you. And with that spell on the stack, I bounced Teferi to my hand with Teamer Sabertooth. Let her cast a second spell, and then put Teferi back in play.
Yeah, and then those spells were, what was it? It's not Armageddon. It's the white.
It was a board wipe.
Wrath of God.
There you go. Yeah.
It was Wrath of God, hold priority to Fairy's Protection. And I went, damn, that's the 2-card interaction that is White's version of Cyclonic Rift. But because Teferi was out, she wasn't able to actually respond at instant speed. So yeah, Paul just bounced it back to his hand so she could. And then,
put Teferi back in play. And then I said, okay, so while that's all on the stack, I'm gonna Assassin's Trophy one of your lands. And I'm gonna flash out Archaeomancer with my infinite mana and get that back. And then with Teamer Sabertooth, I'm gonna Assassin's Trophy everybody's lands till you have nothing left. And I'm gonna do the same thing with everybody's permanents. And James is like, and I get this a lot when I play those people's decks. James is like, I would never do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't even think to do that. I'm just like, oh yeah, Archaeomancer is a good card. To really just blow the game out by Assassin's Trophying everything that your opponent has. I mean, seems good. It's really good, but not something I would ever do.
Hey, it's a win condition.
It is.
If you don't have a way to draw cards, but you have exactly those cards, it counts.
Yeah, it does. My game plan was elves, and I wanted to untap and tap as many elves as I possibly could. So I built up this massive board state of elves in that same game, and Ross had put an Hour of Revelation on the stack, and I was like, oh man, there goes like I think I had like 15, 16 elves on the battlefield with a Copperhorn Scout that would let me untap my stuff and do some tappy shenanigans.
Yeah.
And Michaela was like, hold on, I want to do something fun. And she always uses the word fun when she's about to do something chaotic. I guess chaos is her fun. And she's like, I'll just cast a Rakdos Charm in response. I was not happy about that at all.
Yeah, with the mode, by the way, to have each creature deal 1 damage to its controller.
Yeah, of course. So I took a lot of damage and then had my board wiped. And then Paul just proceeded to then just, get a lot more value than I could at the table. Even though I was an elf deck, I was drawing like no cards. And I thought I was in a pretty good position where I was going to let everybody die and everything. But before I took the damage, I did activate Lathril once and I got to drain the table for 10 and I gained 10. So I only ended up taking like 5 damage off the Rakdos Charm, but it was all one hell of a big stack in a pod that only one player was playing blue. So yeah, it was kind of fun to see just the interactions of like what can happen with a board wipe.
I just realized I could have just bounced all my creatures to my hand with Temur Sabertooth.
Yeah.
And then with my infinite mana, flash out to Fairy and then put all my creatures back out.
Yeah.
In response to the Wrath of God.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right.
It doesn't matter. You ended up winning the game anyway. It does not matter. And then game 2 didn't really matter either because we didn't get to finish it because you had to leave because you had a family thing, which is totally fine. But after that, let's actually get into what today's topic is all about, Paul. You and I were kind of scrolling through Reddit and trying to figure out a topic for today and trying to really rack our brains about some things that, we want to talk about and we want to cultivate in our listenership. And I came to you with this proposition. I was like, what about underrated cards? Because I read this article on there and I was like, this guy was like, I found this card and made me think about what other cards people out there that don't really play. So we scoured EDH Rec for the last couple of hours. We came up with our top 10 list. This isn't in any order. We're just going to do it in classic Wooburg order. And with all that set and done, this is our top 10 cards that we think should be played more in Commander. And we're going to start off with white here. So we have 3 cards in white. The first one in white here is Kataki War's Wage. It is 1 and a white for a 2/1 legendary spirit that says all artifacts have, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you pay 1 generic mana.
Now, this includes all artifacts, so it includes, mana rocks, it includes like Immortal Sun, it includes Cage Sun, it includes treasures, clues. This is just like essentially 2 mana. If you want your mana rocks, they're gonna have to pay for themselves for now until you find a way to kill this 2/1.
Yeah.
Right. This card for just a 2 mana 2/1 actually represents quite a significant threat to usually just everybody else. Mainly because if you're playing it in your deck, you're aware that you have to play around it, unless like the deck is built for you and somebody just shoves it in your chest and says, "Here, take this." But most of the time, your deck is built around the fact that you have Kataki in your deck. Like, I think I play this in Elishnorn. I can't actually remember. If I don't, that's a big misplay. But, great card. Me and James actually just recently talked about how good stacks pieces are independently in Commander, especially with how much people love to ramp and make clues and treasures and all that, razzle-dazzle in Commander right now. Literally, you can't go a game without seeing like a Smothering Tithe or, what have you. I feel like I mention Smothering Tithe every episode, but
You do.
it's just so relevant.
It is.
at all points in time.
I mean, we literally had an episode where we talked about tokens and how relevant they are in 99.9% of all games we play in person or online. Everybody's kind of relying on, investigate triggers to make clue tokens to then draw cards, or, making food tokens to then gain life, and also treasure tokens because since like Commander Legends onwards, we've gotten so much like treasure support that this could also be your commander as well. But Kataki could really shut down those strategies as well. It also shuts down all artifact-based decks. If someone has a massive pile of treasures, it just makes them basically sacrifice half of them to pay for the other half. So they got 10 treasures, they have to sack 5 to keep the other 5 around to then be able to use later on in their turns. I mean, it's
now
a
I will say
fantastic
that
card.
Kataki doesn't stop them from using treasures for like instants and stuff. But you can use your own best judgment to determine whether or not it'll basically be a meta call at that point.
Yeah.
But Kataki, for that reason, is also like kind of fair as far as a stacks piece goes. It doesn't literally shut people out because, like James said, you can use half your treasures to pay for the other half if you really want them around. So if you're looking for a way to keep the ramp in check in your play group, but not completely shut people out of the game, I would say that Kataki is probably a really good way for you to do that. It's super efficient, really easy to cast, and honestly, it's pretty easy to find. It can also be tutored by a variety of ways. You got Imperial Recruiter, I think, can find this. If you're playing like Captain Sisay, it is legendary, so Captain Sisay can find it. I don't know. There's a myriad of ways to find this card, and for that reason, it is on this list as something that me and James think should be seeing at least a little bit more play. I think it was at, 2% on EDH Rec? Something like that?
I believe so, yeah. I didn't keep the stats of like what percentage these cards are being played in what decks, because we did look at a lot of cards.
Yeah, that is very true. Every card that we have on here is at least below, I want to say it was like 5%.
Oh yeah, it's definitely below 5%. I think you'll actually find it's probably below 4% as well.
Yeah,
so it's
we
about
actually
4%
have like
and lower.
We actually have like a 0%er somewhere here.
Yeah, we do.
Which one it was. Oh yeah, I know which one it is actually.
And the next card we have on here is Luminark Ascension. This is 1 and a white for an enchantment that says at the beginning of each opponent's end step, if you didn't lose life this turn, you may put a quest counter on Luminark Ascension. Then it has an activated ability of 1 and a white to create a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying. You can activate this ability only if Luminark Ascension has 4 or more quest counters on it.
So I'm actually the one that brought this up, and the reason why I brought it up is because I feel like it's remained dormant for quite some time. This one is actually on the higher end of things, both in terms of price and play rate. I think this is one of our only 4%ers here. But what I like about Luminark's Ascension is that what I feel is one of the biggest problems in Commander right now is that people just don't attack enough, right? People are very incentivized to just sit back, ramp their mana, do their thing. Now, I'm not saying that's a wrong way to play, but you, as a player, can really capitalize on that playstyle by playing cards like Luminark Ascension, which basically say, like, hey, yeah, you can do that, but just so you know, I'm literally going to be unstoppable later because I'm going to be making 4/4 angels constantly without devoting any other resources to the field other than 2 lands and an enchantment. Not to mention that in 4-player Commander in particular, this triggers at the beginning of each opponent's end step if you didn't lose life, which means that, if you get this down on exactly turn 2, obviously that's like an ambitious goal when a 100-card single or 99-card singleton deck. If you get this down exactly on turn 2, chances are you're going to have 3 counters on this by the time you get your turn. Because it goes, opponent 1, opponent 2, opponent 3, then back to you.
Yeah. I actually think this is in my Mardu. It's a Mardu Hate Bears deck. It runs Timner and Vile Smasher as the commanders. Michaela played it at at Windows the other day. And it's great. It puts out 4/4 angels. It makes they're flying. They're 4/4s.
It's not once per turn.
Exactly. You can do it as many times per turn as you want, as long as you've got those 4 quest counters, which are quite easy to get, especially like in the early games, like the early stages of Commander where everyone's trying to set up or something, or even if in the late game, if you cast a board wipe and then drop this, you're off to the races.
Yeah. And especially for you proliferate/attract lovers out there, you only need 1 counter to get the party rolling.
Yeah, exactly. 1 turn of not being hit, put a counter on this, and then just start proliferating it. Seems quite easy, right? The next card is a card that I put on the list that I don't think's being played anywhere near as much as I want it to be, and I love this card. It's a card that I loved since I first saw it when it was printed in Modern Horizons 1. This is Winds of Abandon. This is 1 and a white for a sorcery that says exile target creature you don't control. For each creature exiled this way, its controller searches their library for a basic land card. Those players put those cards onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle their libraries, and it has Overload for 4 and 2 white.
There's not a lot to say about this card that isn't already obvious. I think this card should see play for the same reason that Cyclonic Rift sees play. Now, obviously, that is a bit of a bold comparison because Cyclonic Rift also hits, non-creature pieces that might be hosing you down. But Winds of Abandon is also 1 mana cheaper and exiles instead of just returning it to the hand, which, for various reasons can be relevant. Reanimation decks hate to see it. It also, it ramps the opponent, but ideally by the time you're playing this card, that aspect of it is really not so relevant. Again, hopefully not so relevant. This also gets around Hexproof, Shroud, Protection from White, Hexproof from White. You name the type of evasion, this gets around it. The only one thing that this doesn't get around is, ironically, another white card, Teferi's Protection, LOL. White's very good at counterplaying itself, it turns out. This is a card that's, honestly, when James brought it up, I was like, I think that card doesn't see a lot of play because it's expensive. And it turns out it's only a few bucks. Yeah, I didn't know.
It's like $3. It's cheap as chips.
Yeah, I thought it had spiked up at some point, which maybe it did, and it just came back down. But yeah, for just a few bucks, you get something that is both spot removal and a board wipe when you need it. And we all know how Paul loves his versatility, his modal spells.
This is a modal spell without actually being a modal spell.
Yeah, people talked a lot about Damn when that card came out.
Yeah.
Right? And that card's really good. This card is more or less the same thing. The front mana cost is exactly the same, and the overload is slightly more expensive, 2 mana more expensive, but you're getting an exile effect instead of just destroy.
Yeah, I play this one in gear ed so that I can kind of just pave the way for my rhinos to get in and slap face. I tried to figure out how many one-sided board wipe effects are there that I can slap down in Naya colors. This was one of them, and I've loved it ever since I saw it. And I've always wanted a place to play it, and now that I do, I can Winds of Abandon and then go to combat, and everyone's like, oh, god damn it, because it does get around so many different ways of protection. It also, it gets rid of Indestructible as well, and gets rid of those pesky Eldrazi Titans that I hate seeing in my games.
Important to note that those pesky gods that people like to play, if they ever become creatures,
gone.
Winds of Abandon actually will take care of that for you.
Yeah, it will. And I love it for that fact as well. Winds of Abandon, please play it more. I want to see this in at least 6% of decks by the end of the month. If you've got a white deck and you're not running this card, just try it. Try it out, do some testing, see what you think. I think it's great. After that, we're going to go into blue. So we have 2 cards here in blue that we're going to talk about. The first one is Fairy Artisans. This is 3 in a blue for a 2/2 creature fairy artificer that has flying. It also says, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, create a token that's a copy of that creature except it's an artifact in addition to its other types, then exile all other tokens created with Fairy Artisans.
This card was actually when these decks came out, which I believe this was the
17.
This is 2017, yeah. 2017 decks
Sorry,
came out.
16. Sorry, 16.
Yes, that is 16, yes. When the 2016 Commander decks came out, this was actually one of the most hyped cards from that set, if I recall correctly. I just remember a lot of people talking about this card, a lot of people playing this card. And right now, I think this one was sitting at about 2% of all decks on EDH Rec.
Yeah.
Price might be a factor in this one. This one is on the more expensive side. Looks like it's sitting between $13 to $15, depending on condition. But it has a lot of relevant text on it. First of all, it's a fairy that is not an irrelevant creature type, but that's a kind of a minor thing. Aside from that, it lets you buy opponents' ETBs. Like if an opponent casts a Reclamation Sage, right, and it enters the battlefield, you get to get your own Rec Sage. And if they target something of yours, well, you get to spitefully but rightfully blow up something of theirs. It could be a way to politic with somebody, like, hey, I have Reclamation Sage in my hand, but that person over there has 2 very problematic permanents. You think we could team up and kill both of them? Sure, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, of course. No problem. It's actually a way, if you get this down early enough, to get copies of other people's commanders. Nekusar
I didn't even
players
think of that.
Nekusar players love the fact that they're not affected by Nekusar. Well, guess what? Now, not only are they affected by Nekusar, but your other opponents get affected by it twice.
That's disgusting, and I love it. I didn't even think of that. I was more thinking of like, oh, in Yarrick, like if I play this in Yarrick, I'm going to get 2 copies of things and I can buy their ETBs twice. Oh man, that's so good. But it has so many different other implications that I didn't even think of. Like Paul said, you get access to somebody's commander. If they're playing like, if someone's playing any commander that is more than 4 CMC and you've ramped hard and you can get this out on turn 3 and then they play their commander, let's say it's Gishath, Sun's Avatar, you're not going to get much out of it. But I mean, a free 7/7 with Vigilance, Haste, and Trample is nothing to really scoff at.
Yeah, and it also, the token it makes is also an artifact. There's a lot of relevance for artifacts, obviously. I can't think of any off the top of my head because I am very tired for various reasons. But artifacts are very important. James, help me out here. You have an artifact deck.
I do have an artifact deck. There are so many ways to untap and retap artifacts that if you get somebody's creature that has an activated ability that you want to keep doing, you can just untap it with the various amounts of keys. That being Voltaic key or the other key that I can't remember right now. That isn't Cloud Key. That came out.
I can't remember either.
M20.
I can't remember either,
Heatron
but I know which
key?
one you're talking about.
That sounds like a key. Anyway, there are a lot of ways to untap and retap creatures, artifacts. You could put Freed from the Real, which is a blue card, on the token and then keep tapping and untapping it as much as you wanted to. Slot this in the Urza deck, do the same thing. It all of a sudden taps for mana. You can tap it to do the thing and then untap itself and just, whatever. It's such a good card, and I actually forgot it was a card, even though it was a card that I went, oh, I should be playing this in Yarrick. After Paul and I built Yarrick, we didn't even think about it, and probably should have. So there'll be a slight adjustment to that deck being made very, very shortly.
Yeah, there's not much to say about this card. It's just like, it's one of those cards that you just play it and it gets its value. At worst, it's a 2/2 flyer that eats removal.
Yeah, exactly. At worst, 2/2 flyer, it'll get in, do some damage, and it'll really piss your opponents off because you're chipping at them away with a 2/2 fairy.
Yeah, it's not like you're committing 7 mana to like an old Gnawbone that just gets killed before it can even make treasures, right? It's 4 mana. You play it early,
Paul,
nothing really happens.
I've apologized 3 times for this now. 3 separate occasions on 4 different days. I've apologized. Don't even think about it, like trying to figure out my math on that one either. I've apologized, and I realized I should have let you keep that old Gnawbone. Sometimes my brain goes into, oh my god, I know what old Gnawbone can do. I need to get rid of it, and not realize how much of a saving grace it was going to be.
For those of you that are curious, that was a jab at James from our last stream.
Yeah.
Which actually that video did not get uploaded.
Not yet.
It was way too long.
Yes.
So just tune into our next stream for some more exclusive content. That sounds like an OnlyFans ad. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. We've got Opposition as our next card. It is 2 and 2 blue for an enchantment that has an activated ability of tap an untapped creature you control, tap target artifact, creature, or land.
This card is actually this was one of the first cards I put in Calamax when me and James worked on that deck, which was all the way back in like episode 4 or whatever. And for good reason. Obviously, it's very good there. But it's also just a good card in general. One of the best things that you can do in Magic is deny an opponent an opportunity. Well, either deny them resources or deny them the opportunity to use said resources.
Mm-hmm.
Opposition does both. If they use their resources on like some kind of big creature, or like if their commander needs to attack to really do anything, you just tap, like some dinky little token, and you get to tap their 20/20, 30/30, 40/40, 70/70. Doesn't matter how big it is.
Okay.
Tap a freaking Kozilek with your 1/1 squirrel.
I've used this card two ways. One, to keep Calamax tapped and tapping down someone's, permanent that I don't want tapped, or specifically their artifacts or creatures or lands. But I've also used it spitefully when I was versing an obvious combo player who is someone that I used to play a lot with, who is wanting to go infinite with... basically the whole deck just consisted of playing Thrasios just for the colors, and then the rest of the whole deck was elves, so that they could make infinite mana of Solvala, Heart of the Wild, and I believe it was Freed from the Real, to tap and untap her or something, to generate infinite amount of mana. And they only had 2 lands, and Solvala on the field with Thrasios, and in their upkeep, I did tap 3 of my tokens to tap both of their lands down and their Solvala, so they couldn't pop off and win that turn. And they weren't happy about it. And
I think I was in that game.
Ended then.
Can't remember if I was in that game, but
I can't remember either. That was a very, very long time ago, and that is the most that's the most relevant play that sits in my head for this card. But for that fact, it's like anybody who's ahead, if you're able to generate enough tokens or even just a couple of tokens, and you don't mind them being tapped for, their turn so that they can't really hit into you, because you've got, you're tapping their creatures down. It's all about resource denial and aggro denial, because you can stop, Voltron decks from swinging at anybody. You can stop whatever. Realistically, I believe if you're goaded, you can activate this to then tap your goaded creatures so they don't have to attack because they're not able to attack.
Yep, that would work.
So
we've been talking this whole time about tapping creatures though, and I want to point out a couple other things. This can also tap artifacts, which normally not too relevant. It does let you deny people, if they have a turn 1 Soul Ring or whatever, you can deny them a bit of their mana on their turn by doing that on upkeep. But if you really want to be cheeky, a lot of older artifacts need to be untapped for their static abilities to apply, such as Static Orb, Winter Orb. And this doesn't say tap something an opponent controls. It says just tap target artifact. So you can tap your own Static Orb, Winter Orb, blah, 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 insert orb here. And you'll be just peachy on your turn, but nobody else will get to play the game. Another thing that you can do is that this taps lands. And that's pretty relevant because a lot of people have some pretty greedy mana bases. That's not something I'm making up. That is factual. I think James will concur with me here.
Yeah.
Based on entirely empirical evidence that mana bases are getting relatively greedy. So if somebody is sitting on a single Blood Crypt, right? Let's say they're playing a 5-color deck and that's their only black source. Well, I think everybody can see where I'm going with this.
Tap the Blood Crypt. Resource denial.
You can tap the Blood Crypt, or you can play the politics game and say, hey, is that your only black land? Man, it'd be a shame if somebody tapped it on your upkeep so you couldn't use it on your turn. The politics spiral from there. But something particularly egregious you can combine with opposition if you're in at least Simic is a Seedborn Muse. And that's... not something that you would make friends over, but it would be cool for you at the time.
Yeah. Put this in the Adrix and Nev deck, because then you just make lots of tokens. Bring out Seedborn Muse. Or I guess something like Seedborn-like effects. You could play this with Quest for Renewal, because all you have to do is tap 4 creatures, and then you can untap all your creatures at the end step. Sorry, at the end step, I believe it is. So, there are ways to get things untapped and more than just Seedborn Muse. And, opposition. It is a frustrating card. I understand that. It's a frustrating card when you try to figure out all of its different complexities. But also in the ways of, light stacks, heavy control. It is a good card that's going to stop people from popping off a little too early, especially if you're playing a bit of a late game kind of strategy. You need to really get through the early game and the mid game, not touched, and then really progress into the end game with lots of resources. You can kind of slow everybody down as much as you need to and see where it kind of goes from there. And the politics is just off the charts. If you want to, say, hey, I can tap that stuff down if you can deal with it, yada, yada, yada. I won't swing at you, you won't swing at me, we'll be all good kind of stuff. Fantastic card. Just definitely I don't advocate for putting this card with any of the orbs, like Winter Orb or anything, but sure. I mean, why not? You know, just go easy. We're not here saying you have to play it with it, but like, if you could think about it and be like, hey, resource denial, but in a way that is kind of flavorful, that is outside of Urza, maybe, yeah, sure, why not? Give it a go. But if your playgroup starts hating you, don't blame us.
Yeah, I mean, I also think it's important to have some element of control in a game. I know a lot of people don't like playing against control, but I think it is a necessary evil. And in saying so, I think it actually is not even evil. I think it's just a good thing to have. Some way to have some control over the game. Because if nobody has control over the game, then, like I mentioned before, things just kind of spiral out of control. Nobody really does anything about it. And then, you know, somebody pops off earlier than everybody else, and that's basically how the game will be determined.
Yeah.
So opposition is an element of control that is very effective and can be incorporated into a lot of different strategies.
Recommendation, play it. All right, we've got one card to talk about before we go into our combat phase here and hear a message from our sponsors. We're going to move on to our black card now. So we only have one card here to talk about, and that is a card that Paul actually brought to the table. I brought something different. Paul brought this one. We kind of like did the pros and cons of which one we think was a little bit better. This one ended up winning out, and that is Snuff Out. It is 3 and a black for an instant that says if you control a swamp, you may pay 4 life instead of paying Snuff Out's mana cost. Destroy target non-black creature. It can't be regenerated.
Now, I know non-black might seem like a bit of a bummer, but honestly, that is not that big of a consequence compared to the fact that you can cast it when you're completely tapped out, and the only condition is that you just have to control a swamp, right? Yeah, you pay 4 life, but it's not like these other free spells, you know, quote unquote, like Force Negation, Force Will, where you got to pitch a card to use it. You don't actually lose any more resources other than your life, and there are a lot of non-black creatures that people play nowadays. Basically, all of them, except for, I don't know, like Keurig is a pretty popular one, the Black Mana Rampers, but this still hits artifact creatures, which a lot of these spells are, that's some of the text they have on them is that they don't hit artifact creatures either. But this can kill, like, it can kill Cullen, it can kill, it can't kill Nekusar, LOL. I was just about to say Nekusar, but he's actually a black creature. Give me another problematic non-black commander. A really popular one.
Tatyova.
Tatyova's a good one.
As I'm looking at it right now, I mean, Calamax as well. I mean, there are so many problematic non-black commanders that you can get rid of. Kennen is one of them. I mean, if you really wanted to get rid of Girard, you could get rid of him. Any of the Krankos are also really problematic because they'll start spiraling out of control really quickly.
The Praetors.
The Praetors as well. Get
Except
rid of
for
Jin-Gitaxias. Except for Sheoldred, yeah.
Yeah. I was telling James, I got blown out by this card like 8 years ago. And because of that one time, I have never forgotten the name of this card. From all the way back in Mercadian Masks. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's one hell of a card. All right, that is half of our list. We're going to go to our combat phase now. And this is where we're going to hear a message from our sponsors right now. Welcome back from that ad break. We're going to get back into the top 10 cards that we think people should be playing in Commander. So we're going to go to our red cards now, because that is the next color in the Wooburg order. And those ones, we have 2 of them. The first one is a card that came out in, what was this, Modern Horizons 2? Yeah, Modern Horizons 2. It's a card that Paul brought to me and was like, this is a card that we should be talking about, and that's Chef's Kiss. It is 1 red for an instant that says gain control of target spell that targets only a single target or player. Sorry, single permanent or player. Copy it, then reselect the targets at random for the new spell and the copy. The new targets can't be you or a permanent you control.
This is kind of... the best comparison for this is probably Wild Ricochet. Wild Ricochet a little different because the spell doesn't actually need the target, but most of the text is exactly the same. The best use of this card, I would say, is probably if somebody is trying to use some spot removal on your commander or something, you get to not only save your commander, but kill two birds at one stone, so to speak, because you get a copy of that as well, and you know that the targets can't be any of your stuff or you. If you have a particularly heavy, what's the name of that creature? Emrakul meta. If somebody likes to play Emrakul the Promised End, I believe Chef's Kiss can actually copy Emrakul on the stack and gain control of the original, and you get to mind slaver two people because Emrakul targets on the stack. Not sure if that's true, but I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, I mean, I think just like getting coincidental value as well as having a red quote counterspell end quote at your disposal is a really cool effect. It's not something that we see very often, and I think I talked about this card back when Modern Horizons 2 first came out, and I said this was one of my picks for one of the best red cards, and I still stand by that opinion. And I think this card is actually sitting at like 1% play rate currently, if I remember correctly from the metrics we were looking at.
Yeah, it's definitely not played enough.
Yeah, and like that includes myself. Like I should be playing this card more. I have a couple copies of it.
Like, I need this card in I need this card in Calamax.
Yeah, or Gearred even.
Yes. Yeah, fantastic card. Just never really thought about it. And that is mainly the thing of these cards, is just like we get so many products each year that it's so hard to remember what card came out in what set and when they came out. And we were talking about cards before the show and we're like, did we know this card was even printed in this set? To which the answer was probably no.
Yeah, it was Rolling Earthquake. That got printed in Double Masters. Y'all can let us know if you knew that happened, but I didn't. The person that we were talking to before this also did not know. Quite an anomaly.
I didn't have a clue because we were talking about it as like we were going to put it on the list, but then we were like, oh, it was just printed. So, I mean, it'd be a good time for people to pick up a copy of it, but at the same stack, like, it was just printed, so probably a lot of people know about the card, but aren't really playing it. But yeah, honorable mention to Rolling Earthquake. Go and read it. Go and pick it up. Go and play it in your red decks.
So I was just going to mention another cute little interaction with Chef's Kiss. Not an ideal use of it, but like if you have a creature and an opponent has a creature that has hexproof, you can actually like target your own creature with a removal spell and then cast Chef's Kiss on your own removal spell to force it to reselect the hexproof thing. I think that works. I can't actually remember, but no, that doesn't work. Ignore me. The spell will fizzle because it has hexproof and it's your spell. Never mind.
Yes.
Ignore me. James, cut this.
Never cut anything. All right, let's move on to our next card here, Paul. We have Felden of the Third Path. I love this card, man. Like, I play this card in a lot of my decks, because I know how good this card is, but not everyone might know how good this card is. It is a 1 red for a 2/3 legendary creature human artificer that has an activated ability of 2 and a red and tap. Create a token that's a copy of target creature in your graveyard, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, and you sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step.
Way too much versatility for this card for it to be under $1 and played as little as it is. I mean, okay, so at a bare minimum, it's a mono red reanimate with a very low investment cost. 3 mana to cast, and then 3 mana in a tap. Great at the surface level. But then when you start to explore some of the more niche interactions with it, or, wider applications, like we mentioned Gearred already. Gearred loves tokens. Felden can make a token of any creature that's in your graveyard, and then Gearred can populate it and make another one. Felden can also reanimate your commander. So, like, if you like Gearred, but he's just starting to cost a little too much, you let him sit in the graveyard, you let him chill for a bit, and you play Felden, and Felden all of a sudden gets you a new Gearred every turn. And you just, you keep the train rolling. The token that he makes is an artifact, which I mentioned before with Fairy Artisans, very relevant, except now you're in red, so even more so than before. And yeah, I mean, it's a human as well, a relevant creature type. Really not a whole lot that's like not immediately obvious about the card, which is why it's so surprising that it's played so little. I would guess it's probably the fact that it's 3 mana to play, 3 mana to activate, but like, come on, y'all. That's not that bad. I've seen people play way worse cards than Felden.
Yeah. You've seen me play worse cards than Felden. And I like, finely tuned, focused Magic. I play Felden in my Gear Ed deck. I play it in my artifact deck because, again, it makes artifacts. So then I can, tap it, rebuy an artifact out of my graveyard. Oh, sorry, a creature out of my graveyard, turn it into an artifact. And then if I want to swing with it, I can swing with it. If I don't want to swing with it and it was just an ETB creature, like say Dockside or something, I can then, uptick Duretti or downtick Duretti and then sacrifice it and exchange it with something else in my graveyard if I want to, like another artifact. That way I can then just do it again next turn. This card has so many different implications and so many different complex ways of being able to use it. It goes and gets you, if you want a 3-mana Solemn Simulacrum every turn, you can do it. You go and ramp yourself every turn, you'll draw a card every turn. You can swing with it and deal a little bit of damage if you need to, let it die early. You'll always,
I'm glad you actually mentioned the word sacrifice, because I completely forgot that unlike most abilities with this wording, Felden actually sacrifices on the end step, whereas most cards nowadays will exile it or something similar, which means that you actually get death triggers, right? So, your Worm Coil Engine, James mentioned Solemn Simulacrum. There's like that weird fox from Kaladesh that's basically a Solemn Simulacrum, kind of.
Is it Filigree's Familiar?
Yeah, that's it. Filigree Familiar. That's the one. Your Junk Divers, your Mere Retrievers.
All these cards I play in my artifact deck. Hence why I have Felden in there.
Yeah, but there's a bunch. I'm just, I'm thinking of the immediate ones that pop off the top of my head. And also Felden you sacrifice at the beginning of the next end step. So you can do like the Kiki Jiki thing where at the beginning of your previous opponent's end step, you reanimate something and you get to keep it for your whole turn.
Which then you untap Felden and reanimate something else, and then you sack 2 things.
Yeah.
And or you can have 2 copies of the same creature if you want to, because as long as they're not legendary, you can at the beginning of the end step of the turn previous, you activate Felden and you get something, and then you do it in your turn, you get the same thing. Bada boom, bada bing. You've got 2 things. You can sacrifice them both. Do it with Solemn Simulacrum. Ramp yourself 2 lands and draw 2 cards.
Yeah, the options really are limitless. This card used to be really expensive, like almost $20, I think, and then they reprinted it a bunch. It's now under $1. If you've ever been looking for just like some kind of way to reanimate stuff repeatedly, Felden's probably your best and cheapest option.
Yeah,
realistically speaking.
All right, and with all of that, let's move on to our next color, which is actually our last color, which is green. And this was one of the first cards that we put on the list. Paul brought it to my attention. We had a good old discussion about it, and this is the card that really kicked off this whole episode. And it again goes against everyone playing artifacts, and if anybody ever wants to ramp with non-land ways or non-creature ways to ramp, this is going to hose them and hose them hard. We are talking about the card Titania's Song. This is a 3-ender green for an enchantment that says each non-creature artifact loses its abilities and is an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its total casting cost. If Titania's Song leaves play, this effect continues until end of turn.
Yeah, so I actually knew this card existed, and while we were looking up, stuff to talk about, I brought this up to James, and I was like, is this card not just like kind of cracked in the current meta with everybody making like treasures off, like Smothering Tithe and whatever? Like,
yes.
Not only that, yes. but people that ramp with like, they go like, okay, turn 1, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Fellwar Stone, Mox Diamond, or Mox, not Mox Petal, Lotus Petal. That's the card I was thinking of. Mox Opal. It renders all that stuff useless, every single bit of it, and it's on an enchantment, rather difficult to deal with. Especially since a lot of people these days play blue and black, which are, I'm pretty sure, the 2 worst colors for dealing with enchantments, actually.
I believe it.
Makes sense to me, because green and white are primary. I think red has like a couple things now. Black actually has a couple ways now, too. But still, this deals with the acceleration problem, if you have one in your play group. But it's pretty much a problem everywhere, so I assume that there is. You just slam this down.
Treasures are useless. Mana rocks are useless except to swing in for like 1 or 2 damage. Now, obviously, this affects you too, but if you're playing the card, chances are that you're playing around said card, and you're in green, which means that you have a lot of ways to ramp lands into play, not necessarily artifacts specifically.
Yeah, use sorcery speed land ramp, and also my favorite way to ramp, mana dorks, because they're fantastic. And play it in a green stompy deck. Turn all your opponent's artifacts into creatures, and then swing, and then watch them either block with those artifacts or attack you with those artifacts, and just chump block them with things.
Yeah. Now you might be thinking, but somebody can just blow me out with liquid metal torque, or what's the other one? Liquid metal coating. Yeah, liquid metal coating.
Yeah.
But those don't have abilities either because they're not creature artifacts. They just become tutus.
Wow, powerful stuff.
I know. Honestly speaking, I think I might actually buy a few copies of this card because it's super cheap, and in the current meta, it's super relevant, like at basically all times. Look at all those Urza decks, bro. I mean, granted, it doesn't really hurt Urza that much, but
not really, but still, like, yeah.
Oh, actually, it does because
does.
Winter Orb doesn't have the freaking text on it to stacks you.
Exactly. You want a way around like stacks pieces and winter orbs and stuff. We've found the card for you. Titania's Song. Pick it up. Paul's gonna pick up like 8,000 copies of this card. All right, we have one last card to talk about, Paul, here, and it is a card that came out in Throne of Eldraine. Something that I would have seen being played almost in every deck that wants this effect, because it is colorless. That's why we left it for the end. Especially in, decks that aren't in green that want something to give haste. We're talking about Crashing Drawbridge. This is a 2-mana 0/4 artifact creature wall that has Defender and has an activated ability to tap creatures you control gain haste until end of turn.
This is not a card I expected to be talking about on this list.
I agree.
Honestly.
I thought once we talked about this once in Throne of Eldraine, which is actually before we started this podcast. But when we talked about it, you and I off air, before this podcast was even a thing, we thought this was going to be in almost every deck. I have it in my Taster deck, so that way my spirits that I make, I can either sacrifice them or I can tap this to then make them have haste. Yes, I mean the downside is it is colorless. It is, or not that it's colorless, but it is colorless. It is a creature. It is affected by summoning sickness, which means you can't get haste the turn it comes down. Yes, I know that is a downside, but I still don't think that's big enough of downside for people not to be playing this card.
If I had to guess, I would say the reason why this card may be not seeing play is because people don't really use the combat step, so haste is, not as relevant as it used to be. But even so, I'm pretty sure this was like a 2%er. That seems questionable.
Seems extremely low. I mean, even though we're not using the combat step anymore, still giving your creatures haste so that then they can, how many other creatures have you got come down that have activated abilities like Felden that you want to activate straight away? Like you have the 6 mana up, you have Crashing Drawbridge on the field. You want to crack the 3, tap the 3, cast Felden, tap the Crashing Drawbridge, and then tap 3 more, tap Felden, and off you go. You've just made a copy of a creature in your graveyard. It may be a Wormcoil Engine, or it may, if we're sticking with just the mono red theme, you could do Combustible Gear Hulk. That's going to either draw you cards or mill you 3 and deal damage to somebody. I mean, there are so many different ways that you could do it. You can use this card as well. I mean, yes, it requires a bit of a setup, and you have to realize it's not as fast as like a Concordance Crossroad or a Fires of Yavi Maya, but on a creature, on a wall that is still a decent blocker, I don't see why people aren't playing this card. I don't understand it.
Yeah, like even in Alesha loves haste. You can get this back with Alesha. I know it has Defender, so it'll just fall out of combat when you get it back, but you can still get it back with Alesha. It's got 0 power, and then you have a haste enabler constantly. The fact that it is a creature and an artifact means you have a myriad of ways at your disposal to actually get this out of the deck, either by drawing it, or there are several tutors you could fabricate for this. You can worldly tutor for this if you really want to. You just have so many ways at your disposal to be able to reliably get this creature, to the point where I would count this as a consistent haste enabler in my deck.
Yeah, you can also Enlightened Tutor as well,
That works.
because it is an artifact. I mean,
Now,
there's
that
so many
one
ways
I
of getting
will
it out.
admit, that one I will admit, probably not the best use of an Enlightened Tutor, but if you
No.
really need haste, you could do it.
Hey man, I see people use like Vampiric Tutor and stuff to go get lands. So I mean, if
Oh,
you
I do
really
that
need to go and
all
get
the
a,
time.
if you need to use a tutor to go and get a haste enabler, just do it. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, don't be like, oh, this Enlightened Tutor usually goes and gets me a combo piece or something, but I need to be able to swing out the next turn. Just go and get your Crashing Drawbridge, put it on the field, tap, and then tap it the next turn you need haste, and then just off you go, you know? Set yourself up to have one of those explosive combat steps. Bring back the combat step, man. Like, you know, that's it. Hashtag bring back combat is the new hashtag. Maybe we should add step in there. Maybe it should be hashtag bring back the combat step.
Yeah. Either way.
Either way. Yeah, that's it. So they are all the cards that we believe that you should be playing more in Commander. If you want to continue this conversation, you can get at us on Twitter and Instagram at CMDR@arms. I think we're very close to 350 followers on Twitter. So, you know, if we can get there and surpass that, I will be one hell of a happy chap. Also, don't forget to go check out our YouTube channel. It is youtube.com/commanderatarms. Over there, you'll find this podcast, our gameplay videos, and our deck techs. It's the place where we upload our To the Battlefield, which is the show that we get to play Magic with your favorite content creators, our friends, and patrons. You can watch those games being streamed live over on our Twitch channel, which is twitch.tv/commanderatarms. Again, I think we're very close to almost 50 followers on there, so we're so close to being affiliated with them. Please go and help us out over there. If you're not following us on either of our socials or our YouTube channel or our Twitch, please go over and show us some love, because it really does help the channel grow. If you want to pick up any of these cards or any sealed product, or maybe do some pre-ordering of Streets of New Capenna, you can do that through our TCG affiliate link. That'll help you support us. There we go. Got it in the end. It's tcgplayer.com/commanderatarms. If you want to rep a Commander at Arms logo across your chest on a super soft Bella canvas shirt, you can do that by clicking the link in the show notes below or the video's description, which will take you to the Bad Fred Design Co. Etsy page, who hosts all of our merch. Go and check out their wooden deck boxes at the same time. They're super cool. I have lots of them on my desk, and I love them, and I use them every day. And everybody I have shown on stream and at card stores have also loved them. If you want to support the show directly and help us create more content for your eyes and your ears, you can do that through Patreon. It is patreon.com/commanderatarms. All tiers get access to the Discord server, and some tiers get access to playing Magic with Paul and I on our streams on Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. EST. And I also want to encourage people who aren't able to actually help the show monetarily, if you could go to Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or anywhere you're listening to this audio and give it a rating. That's going to help those algorithms to really push our name out there and help support us that way. And with all of that, Paul, do you have anything you want to say before we close this episode out?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in and listening. It means a lot to me and James that you took the time. No matter how long, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, the whole time, whatever it is, you took the time to do it, and it means a lot to us. So thank you so much. If you like what you heard, feel free to share our name around with your friends, with your play group, at your LGS. Say, hey, I just listened to these cool guys, Paul and James. They were talking about 10 cards that we should be playing more, and obviously I didn't even know that Titania song existed. Just do whatever you can to get our names out there, get more people involved in the community, and we look forward to hearing from everybody on that. And please make sure you check out the stream, and thereafter, if you missed the stream, make sure to check out the VOD in our To the Battlefield playlist on YouTube. Again, that's if you missed the stream. If you see the stream, that's awesome. If not, tune in on YouTube, catch the aftermath, and leave a comment if you do check it out on YouTube.
And with all that, I'm James.
And I'm Paul.
And you've been listening to the newest episode of the Commander at Arms podcast. And remember, arm yourself with knowledge. Peace.
See ya.